I love fast redeploy operators. They serve so many different purposes, from being a meat shield, a stun bomb, a field executioner, to a literal nuke. But what if we have a stun bomb mini nuke with a pair of gardening shears? That is Kafka. After using her for about a week, I can tell that she is a very interesting operator. But what is her kit like, and how does she compare to Projekt Red? Kafka is a specialist. As part of the fast redeploy archetype, she puts enemies to sleep while also dealing a lot of damage. In terms of stats, she has the highest HP out of all the operators in her archetype, which makes her more defensive, kinda like Gravel. Kafka's talent, Misdirection, increases her attack, doesn't block, and becomes invisible to the enemies, but she can still take damage from environmental hazards and splash damage. Since Kafka doesn't block, she can't be used like other fast redeploys where you can deploy her near the blue boxes. But this allows her to have high survivability on the field. Speaking of survival, I did mention that she has a really high HP. Unfortunately, she won't get to use it during her skill unless you leave her out for longer, which defeats the purpose of a fast redeploy. Totally a misdirection on her stats. Besides that, I do like the addition of the attack buff, which brings her attack to just 1 point shy away from Red's. This buff makes her skill that much stronger, and at some point I was able to take out half the enemy's HP before they reached the main defensive line. Skill 1, Cube of Absurdism, puts enemies to sleep for 5 seconds. Then Kafka creates a huge explosion as arch damage. Before we continue, what is the difference between stun and sleep? Stun stops the enemies in their tracks, but they still take damage from your attacks. Whereas sleep, the enemies are also stopped in their tracks, but they cannot be attacked by your operators, as if Kafka blinds them when she drops in. The sleep takes effect immediately and remains even when Kafka is removed, just like the stun effect on Red's skill 2. On top of that, the sleep duration remains the same on all levels, meaning she offers the same benefit even at Elite 0. I would suggest that you upgrade her to Elite 1 for better damage stats, but that's up to you. Cube of Absurdism is a great skill to pair with Blemish Shine because apparently sleeping enemies are like drugs to her. If you don't have Blemish Shine, that's okay, because sleep is a great alternative for stalling because some enemies cannot be stunned, but they can be put to sleep. Plus, 5 seconds is quite long, and therefore you have a bigger window to plan out your next attack. Maybe deploy a heli drop right next to Kafka? Sleep is still a niche mechanic as of now, but I'm excited to see how it will evolve in the future with the introduction of Black Knight and Erato. And Mastery 3, the arch damage increases from 350% to 450%. And more damage is always great. Skill 2, Shears of Surrealism, is a very weird skill, but this is what makes it interesting. The range of this skill is just one tile, placed 2 spaces ahead of Kafka. Upon deployment, Kafka deals 300% arch damage at level 7 to all enemies on that frontal tile, and continuously attack that tile for the remaining duration of the skill. The range of this skill makes it hard to deploy on certain maps, but it allows for some interesting strategy that involves a range nuke attack. Of course, for this to do any damage, the enemy needs to be stationary on that frontal tile. You can either have an operator between Kafka and that tile, or choose a stage where some enemy stops for a few seconds before moving. As you can tell, this skill is not Kafka's main selling point, but if you can think outside of the cube, you might find this skill useful in some situations. At Mastery 3, the initial arch damage increases from 300% to 400%, and the skill lasts for 15 seconds. Not a bad improvement, as seeing some people in the subreddit actually invested their resources into this skill. I almost forgot. Kafka also has a module. This module gives her an additional 10% attack when there are no allies in the 4 adjacent tiles. To get this module, first you have to defeat 50 enemies with Kafka's skill, and she cannot be a support unit. And secondly, you need to clear the stage 2-7 with a 3-star rating, and you must deploy your own Kafka, and she must defeat at least 10 enemies. To complete the first task, it's easy, you just have to find a map with a bunch of slugs and just use her skill 1 to decimate every single one of them. The module doesn't give that big of a jump, so even without it, Kafka works just as fine. Now to answer the question of this video, is Kafka better than Projekt Red? Of course, I'm talking about Kafka's skill 1 and Red's skill 2. My answer to that is no. Yes, I know it's a bit anticlimactic, but let me explain. Kafka and Red have their own ways of crowd control. On one hand, Red has been a fan favorite and she offers a lot of flexibility with her stun. On the other hand, Kafka is what the community sometimes refers to as an enabler, using her sleep mechanic, basically making other operators stronger. You can clearly see this taking effect in Blemishine, especially since we are getting more operators that can interact with sleep. Kafka definitely has a great potential as a specialist. In a nutshell, if you have Blemishine, might as well try your luck and try to roll for Kafka to take the advantage of her amazing synergy. If you don't have the Radiant Knight's sister, she's still a great operator to use for stalling and crippling the enemies, or if you generally enjoy weird wacky strategy. I prefer her skill 1 as it is easier to use and works very well with my operators. So what do you think of Kafka? Is she worth the investment? Share your thoughts in the comments below.